So my name is Terri Geissinger, and I'm a direct descendant of Lucy Morrison and Luther Morrison. Luther always gets forgotten in this story. You know, I'm sure you probably have heard of my grandmother. And where do I start? You know, for myself, I'm really privileged, and I thought everybody was like this. I was born into a young family. So I had my grandparents and my great grandparents and needed some of my further on and cousins and great uncles almost through like my 30s and 40s. And so our pioneer stories were really held together. And I thought everybody had that until I got older and I realized, boy, not everybody does. And by my late 20s, I was really into history, probably also with the help of Laura Ingalls, because I loved Little House on the Prairie and I grew up in that time period. By the end of my 20s, I became the repository for my family's archives. So all the journals, the diaries, mentions to newspapers, clippings, whatever. And I have boxes and boxes of that. I actually went into a career as a historian and a researcher. And so I did a lot of work for other people, knowing that this stuff is over here, I'll be getting to it. And over the years, of course, learning technology and you know, all the databases that can be out there and making connections. I was always stuffing stuff in those boxes, and I'll get to it. So I retired about 5 years ago and made a big move out of northern Nevada into Montana, which my family still have a cattle ranch up there, and then moved to Thermopolis about a year ago to finish a book that I'm writing. And of course now I'm working at the museum, so I'm not writing right now. How come that works? But I love history, and so I am going to tell you that I am a researcher, and this story is so much bigger than probably what you know. And if you really want to understand Lucy Morrison and how tough she was, because that's probably how you remember her. So her courage, her strength. She was living in a man's world. She was tough as nails, strong opinion. Wrote the governor all the time. She was very into politics as far as making sure that the ranchers and stock growers were protected. And it's really where she came from, where she was born into. And if the people that had the most influence on her life would be her parents and the man she would marry. Oh, okay, I forgot. So we're going to start with her parents. Darius Fellows, it's her father. He was born in New York in 1828. He is the 6th generation born in this country in that line. So that family line came in the 1640s. And so they were deep. I had farms. They were big into farming. They were in New York and New Hampshire, and then migrated into Illinois. And so that's where they actually, as a teenager, he was a couple words that you could describe him. He had a wide skill set. He was very well liked. He had the gift of gab. He had a lot of big dreams. He did not want to be a farmer, but he did want to go out west. And he had the ability to convince everybody around him to join me. Come on, let's go. Let's do it. To show you what kind of man he is, you know how you go to the census and see the occupations? So his occupations, freighter, and he owned his own freighting business. We'll talk about that. He was a butcher, a frontier doctor. Now maybe that's the same, right? Butcher and frontier doctor could be. He owned a few businesses. He was a prospector for a while, and he just did a lot in his lifetime. He was fearless. I would say he was really spontaneous, and he was a bit reckless. So he put his family through a lot. That they made it through, but boy, it risked. He took a lot of risks. And he wanted to go out fast. By the time he was 19, he married the girl next farm over, and that's Lucy Lorette Fellows. You'll notice that this name goes through my family. We have about 5 Lucy Lorettes in our family. Lucy was also 6th generation, born in Vermont. So old family. Her family actually came in the 1630s. And farmers, again, I guess that's what everybody did. And she was, both of them, actually all of them, highly educated, more than your 8th grade graduation or education. They were highly educated, did a lot. Interesting, she was the only child. Her parents were older, very unusual for that time period. Probably gives us an indication that there was a problem genetically. having babies. She lost a lot of babies. And we'll talk a little bit more on that, but she was the only child, very protected, pretty wealthy, bored to death. So guess what she finds is Darius, who's kind of wild and has all these big dreams, wants a big family, let's go west. And they did. So when they married, she was 17. Luther Morrison is ultimately becomes Lucy's husband. You'll notice that they are all the same generation, just born a year apart. And Luther is the unsung hero of this story. There is things mentioned sporadically through the books about Luther, and most of it's wrong. They say he was an old sickly man when they arrived in the Wind River Basin. Oh, he didn't do anything. Well, I guess he sat out there in the sagebrush. I have no idea. But the truth is Luther has an amazing story, and we're definitely going to talk about Luther because he gets gypped out in the history books. Not with me. I'm going to make sure. So Luther, educated, he is born into a family of 8. He's the 3rd child born, first son. All the rest are girls. When he's 18, the last baby's born in the family. It's finally a boy. He's 18 years old, so you can see what she's got. So now you're talking about a big brother. He's used to handling girls and sisters, and all that comes with it. So that's Luther. So we're bumping up. 1851, Darius and Lorette leave St. Charles, Illinois to hit the Oregon Trail. They're going west. I think that they wanted to actually leave earlier, but they had their first son born in 49 during the big rush. And she had some problems with that baby. Now she's got a little 2-year-old and she's 6 months pregnant, which means she knows she's going to give birth on the trail. That had to have scared her, but it wasn't anything new. Lots of women did it. They never talked about it. I am a Oregon Trail. Gosh, I've read so many journals. They never used the word pregnancy. They never, in their journals, they never talked about having a baby. The man might say, she was feeling a little ill, but we were back on the trail within hours, that kind of thing. So, and I'm not kidding. They didn't talk about that kind of thing. So they're headed to St. Charles, or they're headed to Council Bluffs in Iowa, 425 miles. They're in one wagon. They've got 4 mules. My family were into raising mules, both sides. That will play into the story. And they've got a couple extra horses that they're bringing back with one wagon, and they're traveling alone. It's just them. They're not in a big party. Not like the Morrisons. The Morrison family is also leaving for the West. Same year, same wagon train. Morrison family is leaving Jefferson in 1851. They have 12 family members within just their family unit. So we've got Matthew, that's their parents. His parents is 49, 48 for that age. That's really old on the trail. Usually the average age for a person on the Oregon Trail is about 35. Anything above that is pretty rare. So the oldest sister is already married and has 2 children. So they've got a 1 and a 3-year-old with them. You can read that. They've got a few little toddlers. They've got a whole lot of girls, young girls. And I guarantee you that dad and big brother have their hands full making sure keeping everybody safe. And so that's the Morrison business. So Morrison families have 5 family wagons, 3 supply wagons, hired drivers and outriders, 65 head of horses and mules, 2 milk cows, and a large kitchen tent. If you're going to cross 2,000 miles on the Oregon Trail, you probably want to be with this family. They are organized. They've got their jobs. They have all these busy hands, and they set up camp, and they're very organized. So that's what's happening. So I don't want to get ahead of myself. David Newsom. In my family journals and letters, they always said, family came over on Newsom's train. Newsom's train. Well, the Oregon Trail has a really good database. There is no Newsom's train in 1851. I mean, you can drill it down. There's no Newsom. Well, it wasn't Newsom's train. He was the scribe. He was hired by a journal in Illinois to write about the Oregon Trail, to sell tickets on these trains, plus insurance to guarantee your safe passage over. So David Newsom, when he got to Oregon, wrote this book, and that train was documented Now I know how my family got here. Not only do I know the weather, I also know what happened and what I don't know, everything. So, the families, just so this is an interesting, I think it's interesting. This is the difference of the people on the trail, the year that my family came over in 51. Obviously 1340, we had a big boom for the gold rush. 50 was huge, 55,000 people on the trail. You know, people think about the trail, like maybe you guys don't, because you're probably, the little trail, single file, all we go, no. It's just like a runway of wagons. And you know how it's not, a lot of people that drive in the snow don't know what they're doing. It's kind of the same thing. Not everybody knows how to drive a big rig. It's a mess out there. It's crazy. But the year that my family actually goes, it's pretty light, and that's probably why they didn't have any problems. Because the more people you have, the more grass is eaten, for the livestock that's moving and so on, and the game to be able to hunt, to bring in food, it's just goes on and on. So that year was light. The reason why that year was light was because so many people died on the trail the year before with cholera and diphtheria, and they got bad press, and it lightened up the trail, and it just so happened that be the year my family went. So they oversold the wagon train. They oversold it. 350 people show up to go in this one train. And there's no way they can manage that many. The first thing they have to do is they have to cross the Platte River. And if you have that big, that's just one wagon train. There's more going. They can't get everybody across the bridge. So they end up, this wagon train built their own bridge to cross themselves. The mule teams, which there's about a quarter of the wagons are being pulled by mules. They're going to be faster, they're quicker on the feet. They build their own bridge, and the mule teams go over first. Because of David Newsom's book, what happened was a big storm came and it flooded the river and took out all of the bridges and separated that train. The rest of the train that didn't get over, they were separated by 17 days. The mule outfits moved on. They had a rider going in between for messages back, and by the time they got 200 miles separate, they cut themselves off. They are no longer going to be managed by that body. It's fucked. So Matthew Morrison was elected the captain, and that was the other thing in the journals. They talked about my grandpa being the captain of the wagon train. Couldn't find it either. That's why. It's because they were separated. So onward they went. Everything went really well. No news is good news. I wish I had the journals from the trip. They didn't talk of it. Everything went really well. They got to Mormon Ferry. Do you know if you've been to Mormon Ferry outside of Casper? There's a historic site there. Mormon Ferry's out there. And that's when Loretta went into labor. And unlike most families, they would have the baby and move on. Something must have been, it tells us something was wrong. She probably couldn't travel. Maybe the baby was sickly. Maybe they were both sickly. But they stayed and wintered over there. Everybody else moved on. And that was tough. They almost died. We have lots of stories there. And they always use the word camp. So they didn't build a cabin. They weren't staying in the winter. So I don't know what kind of camp it was, but the winter was terrible. They had mules and in camp that they left, that they kept in camp. They died. I don't know if this is true or not, but they said they all, and the story was passed around a million times as my childhood. And he died standing up, frozen, standing up. I don't know if they did, but they were in tough times. Darius did help the Mormons build a new bridge. So he was probably keeping busy with, and probably for food, they were hunting. That baby, Stephen, the second boy, the baby, nearly died of starvation. She walked to an Indian encampment and they had a wet nurse that saved that baby. So that was an interesting twist. So there they are. They are, in the meantime, the Morrison family arrived in Oregon. I have all the homestead papers that they filed in on their land in September 1851. And 6 weeks later, the rest of the train arrived. That's how far apart they got separated. And David Newsom became a neighbor and a lifetime friend of my family's. So that's why my family said, oh, they were David Newsom's train. You can see how they could pick that up. And in the springtime, Darius and Lorette leave their torture chamber at Mormon Ferry. And I included this because to put yourself in their place after what they had just been through, this is a view of what Salt Lake City looked like in 1852. Coming around out of the canyon on that wagon trail, that's what they would have seen. And I have to wonder if they didn't want to just stay. You know, I mean, she had been in primitive, there were no women in that camp. She was alone with these two babies. And so here they are, they were told to supply up when they resupplied and off they went. And they ended up going, they heard about a new strike, bull strike, that's what he was after. And in Northern California and Wairika. So they took the Applegate Trail. If any of you are familiar with the Applegate Trail, it's tough. It goes through lava, you know, land, and it's a pretty tough trail. They get to Wairika. In 1852, they stay there for almost 10 years. Wairika is in Northern California in the mountains. There's lots of camps all spread out. Their third son is born named Darius. And this gives you another idea that she probably had problems with breastfeeding because a year later, Lucy is born. And Lucy is born in a camp. I guarantee you her mother probably didn't want to give birth in a tent in a mining camp with no other women. She probably came early. Lucy was really small. The story that's been passed around in our family, again, 1,000 times, is that 200 miners passed the tent, their caps on over their hearts to pay tribute to the new baby. That brought good luck to the camp. So family remains there for the next 5 years. And Luther has now reconnected with the family. They're actually doing some mining prospecting together and some mining. So Luther's back in with their friends, their best friends. And so things are going pretty good until they don't. And that just happens in life. So they had a big fire in Wairika and it wiped out that town. There was a lot of changes going on. They've been there for almost 10 years. They're done. So Darius has this great idea. Let's go back home, get some money, and then we'll go back to Montana. Okay? Lucy is 5 years old. He makes a special saddle for the horses and the mules, whatever they're riding. Actually, they said it, she's riding a mule. And she's 5, Darius is 6, they're their ages. And they go back a pack string to St. Charles, 2,000 miles. She rides it. In 61, our country is about ready to go into war. The trails are far more dangerous in the 60s than they were in the 50s or any time. Because now you have trail tramps out there ready to rob you. You've got the tribes are a little upset. The buffalo are nearly gone. There's a lot of angst out there. So I think that's why he did this. It's because they were camping and they could slink through and get there as fast as possible instead of with heavy wagons. So they get to Illinois. What a great family reunion. They're meeting grandparents and aunts and uncles they've never met before. But that doesn't last either. Because in the spring of 62, Darius has set up a huge supply of freight train wagons to come back west because Montana is taking off the full, and so is Idaho. And if you guys, have you guys been to Virginia City, Montana? Yeah, most of you good. So, and you probably know this, to supply those towns was really tough because of all of the things that was going on with just the trail systems. That's why Bozeman Trail was cut, was because to supply Montana, Bannock, Virginia City, all those towns. They could use the Yellowstone to be able to use the ferries, but it would either freeze up or if it got too low, they couldn't move them. So the systems to supply those towns got very tight. And it was expensive. So they're bringing in supplies and they're 1,455 miles. And then they have a real tragedy. Now, we never know exactly what happened because Lucy never talked about the details. We only know that it happened. We know the result. They were attacked by Indians somewhere along the way. And Charles Tin and Lucy were both kidnapped. Lucy got away. Charles was never found again. Now, as a 28-year-old young historian, I'm sitting around listening to these family stories, and I doubt it. I don't think it just seems too far-fetched. Except that Charles really is never found. And there is a letter that was written later that surfaced in our archive. And I think that after this, and it gets so teary-eyed thinking about it. So it broke Loretta when she lost Charles. Charles is the one that she saved in the camp, that she really fought hard to save. And now this boy is gone, just gone. And there was a letter written by Alma, another daughter, saying that mother carried the burden of that cross all her life. She refused to believe that he was killed. Instead, it helped her heart heal, thinking he was adopted into the tribe, wherever that was. So every Indian young man that would be his age, she would go up to and look in his eyes, looking for her son. And I don't think you would write that if it wasn't true. That's just that goes into those areas where it's an emotional attachment. And so that is something happened, and it scarred Lucy for the rest of her life. Lucy was scared to death of Indians for that reason. So that kind of makes you realize too how brave she was, because then she moves up here and she's a monk a lot of the time, and she's around a lot of that kind of nature. So I lived through too many Indian dangers in my youth to be able to completely forgive them. There was an ever-present companion, and such terror for so long in your young years is far too deep to erase easily. They arrive in Virginia City, and it is a boom town, and it is going crazy. And you've got the good, the bad, and the ugly showing up there. It is a lot of action going on. They're actually there for 3 years. They opened up the Chicago meat market because it is the Chicago money from the family is probably backing the meat market. Luther is meeting them. Luther didn't go to Illinois. Luther came from Oregon and with sheep and cattle. He's stopping at the stockyard because they're going to open up this meat market. They start a freighting business, just a local freighting business there. Loretta is broken. Goes into deep depression. She's got a 5 or 6 year old, and she is not functioning right. So they hire a live-in housekeeper. Sarah Amelia Baker's 20 years old, and she is a good Mormon girl. And they are, life is moving on. So knowing the history of Virginia City, Montana, Henry Plummer and all the road agents, and there's a lot of problems going on. There was certainly a lot of changes coming in that family, and it took a big turn for my family. Darius wants to get into the freighting business, but the Mormons are the ones that really are holding the strings there because they're coming in from Salt Lake City. He converts to the LDS church. He marries the housekeeper. And he sells the Chicago meat market at 65, this is his notice, and he moves the family to Idaho. Lucy is 8 years old. They set up the Fellows freighting business in Franklin, Idaho. They're servicing Virginia City, Bannock Butte, Helena. This is the Montana Trail. If you guys, I don't know if you've heard of this, it was notorious, it was expensive, it was dangerous. And they set up their business and they did really well. Lucy later talked about going with her father up and down that trail, and she would deliver cats and kittens because they would buy them because the mice would get into the food stock. And so you could sell, little animals like that, the kids would do. She was with her dad a lot. So she says she's just raking up the miles. By the time she was 7, she had like 6,000 miles that she had already ridden. So she's pretty tough. This is fast forward. Okay, 1864, that's when they move. Darius marries his second wife. 65, Sarah has a son, and look, they name him Charles. You can't make this up. I mean, this is amazing to me that they named him Charles. 67, Lorette has a boy. Sarah has a girl. 68 is the formal sealing spouse to Lorette. 69, Sarah has a boy. Lorette has a girl, same years, boy. 1870 is a devastating loss. They lost 2 3-year-olds, a 6-month-old, and her oldest son, Stephen, is in California and dies in an accident. So, poor Lorette. And Darius marries his 3rd wife. She's 17 years old. She is right from England. That happened a lot. They came right from England. And she's 17, Lucy's 13. So now you think she's getting a little nervous? You think Lorette's getting a little nervous? Because Lorette had to go along. She didn't have, women didn't have much choice. So this is one of those black spots that people didn't talk about my family. I still had great uncles that were alive not very long ago, even. They just passed away a couple of years ago. And I asked them, I said, did you know this though? So I was like, well, I think it needs to be known. this is what happened.
Did I lose it as to where Darius' first wife, did she pass?
No.
No.
She's having a brain. She's in there, yeah, she's still there. I know a lot of names and a lot of
He's on
things.
his 3rd what?
All in the same house. Yeah,
Okay.
so they're practicing polygamy.
Okay.
And this is Lucy's words. I learned to hate polygamy because I saw too much heartbreak among women because of it. She's 13 years old, and I guarantee you that her mother is worried about what's going to happen to Lucy. And now we're going to talk about, he is in the area. He is broken away from Darius. Probably we know why. He set up a ranch. He's doing a lot. He's doing a lot on his own. He's very respected. He is a mail carrier. He is elected Idaho territorial legislator. He is a stockman. He's got horses, cattle, and sheep. He's very well liked, and he's a hero. And he's very good friends of Loretta and Darius. He never broke apart, but I think he kept his eye on Lorette because that's like a sister. And Lorette, in our family, it's not written, but the oral history is Lorette asked Luther to take Lucy and keep her safe. She didn't want to be, wasn't interested in being married and to polygamy. So Luther is 43, Lucy's 16. They got married in Soda Springs and remained on the ranch for 8 more years. They had their first boy, Luther, who drowned in an accident. They were crossing a river. A big wave came in, the horses got tangled up in their harness. She had just had my grandmother, who was beside her in the wagon. She put the little boy down, crawled into the river, and he was drowned. They found his body 2 miles down. They had 3 more daughters, and so this is what was happening, but they were getting encroached. There was a lot of pressure around the community. And they were done. They were ready to go off to somewhere else where it was a little bit more open range. And that's when they came to what we now call Wyoming. This is something now that Lucy, I thought it would be, because she was asked later, why did you marry a man so much older than you? And this was her answer. We lived among the Mormons, and I did not want to marry a man who might have other wives. Luther was educated much above most men on the frontier. He was strong, self-reliant, and ambitious, qualities desirable in a man anywhere, but especially on the rugged frontier. He was 6'4", and I was very fond of him. He was a good man, reared in Pennsylvania Quaker family. When I became of age, he seemed the very best husband for me. He was hardworking, kind, and intelligent. So in 1881, they left with 2,500 sheep out of Idaho. The plan, they had 1 herder with them. They had dogs working. She was driving the wagon with the supplies. And she's got a 6-month-old baby strapped in the carriage next to her. She's got a 3 and a 5-year-old in the back. It's a slow go. It's slower than they anticipated, and there was an early winter. They get into the South Pass area, and the women there were, you're going where with these children? You're gonna die up there. The winters are way harsher up there than in here. They talked them into staying. They ended up staying in a cabin that was that was abandoned, and so they set up home there. And they had turmoil. And they lost all their sheep, their 200. And this is the famous saying that, and I think almost all of us, Luther asked her, what do you want to do? It's up to you. Do you want me to go in? We could stay here with these new friends we have and raise the kids. Or we can go on. She said, if there's money in 2,000 sheep, there's money in 200. We're gonna keep going. So Lucy made that decision. So they arrived in Wind River Basin. There's nobody there. There's very few. I mean, the cattlemen, big barons are up here in this basin. Wind River is pretty desolate down there. And they set up, they've got their tents, and Luther hurts his back getting wood out for the winter. He hurts his back bad enough for 2 years that they have to stay in his tent. And so it's pretty rough. In 1884, they did build a cabin on Copper Mountain. That cabin is now at the Trailtown Museum. She's got a baby coming. She figures around near the summer. And Luther does not want to deliver that baby. So they prepare to leave what sheep they have left, which by now they've raised it for 2 years. They put them up in an area where it's a box canyon, and they put clothes on the branches to try to scare off any predators. And they left to try to find a place for her to have that baby. And they had a hard time. They were turned away by a lot of people on their way down. I don't know why, but they were. Luckily, the Cheney family, this picture was taken several years later, obviously. The Cheney family opened their doors, and she delivered her son in 1884. This picture cracks me up. Because if you really look at them, I think my grandma hoarded in on their family portrait. Because Lucy and Lincoln and then Lavisa, those three are mine. Everybody else don't look so thrilled to be taking a picture. I mean, look at oh gosh, good to get this over with. But I think the young girl is sweet on Lincoln. It's just something there. Or that's what I like to think. So the next years that followed the birth of Lincoln was pretty tough. In 1884 through 1889, she did not see another woman. So that also means the children did not see anybody either. And that also means, and it came up later in their lives, that lack of social interaction did show up because they had a hard time. These kids didn't know how to view other kids. And it's tough. So she did talk about those, how tough it was. They did teach them how to read and write. They had lessons at night. The Bible was the only book. They were all very, very religious. And also Lucy always knew what was going on with world affairs and country affairs. They were very much involved, keeping their thumb on the pulse of what was going on in our nation. Predators. They had lots of predators, and not all had 4 legs. So Lucy was definitely in the middle of a lot of trouble on the range. And boy, she held her ground. She was tough. They were all tough, but she had some interesting interactions. I think one of the most popular stories that was shared in my family was the mountain lions. Far more mountain lion problems, issues than wolves and bears. And coyotes were kind of just a constant nuisance. They did talk about the coyotes because they're always there. They were just always there. But the mountain lions, they were sneaky devils. And she talked about how they were up at camp. It's at night. Kids are in bed with her inside the wagon. They have 2 wagons parked together. One's probably for their supplies, one's for her sleeping. She has to get them out night to compete. And she goes down the steps, and just instinct tells her she rolled underneath the second wagon just in time for that lion to jump over her. And she looked eye to eye to that lion. And she started screaming. The children started screaming. Everybody's screaming, and the lion takes off. The next day, she finds a bunch of her sheep are dead. So she didn't have a gun. And the only gun that they did have when she did have one, when her husband was around, was so heavy. She was just a little lady. She's like my friend Skated. She was about 5'2". She weighed 90 pounds most of her life until she was older. And the gun was a heavy military gun. If my husband was here, he would know what number. I don't know the caliber. I can never know. But it was too heavy. She would have to use a tripod. She can't kill a predator. So she had to get very ingenious on how to do things. And what she did with this particular lion, well, not that one, but the lion, she ground glass and she stuck it in the meat, the dead sheep. And that lion was dead a couple days later. So lots of things like that. There's also stories of a lot of the Indians, local Indians, not a lot. I mean, every once in a while she could see them coming riding in and they're looking for food. And she, remember her fear, that she's got all these babies. She would put talcum powder on their cheeks, lay them on a blanket, and she would walk away, keep them away. She would say smallpox. They knew that word. And then, of course, the old story is one of them circled back around, way back around, came back behind her and came up and said, smart woman. They never, and that was like the end of it. They didn't bother. So, but yeah. So predators, two-legged predators, and we'll get into that too. There was plenty of them. So for the family, 1890s was getting better. The children were getting older, a little bit easier on everybody. Luther built Stone Ranch. Do you know the Stone Ranch? Yeah. So he wants to settle down. She's still young. He's no longer young. He wants a ranch. He wants the big fireplace, and let's have dinner at the table. She really wasn't interested in that. She didn't like cleaning house either. So, so Luther builds the Stone Ranch, and that's the first reservoir in Wyoming. I don't know if you know that, but there was a reservoir there. That's actually written on his headstone. So that was a big deal for him to actually build the first reservoir. Luther was connected down there in government. He was elected Turner County Commissioner in 1891. They are developing Casper. My family bought big plots of land and subdivided. So a lot of those subdivisions are named after the children's married names. And that was there. That's the house they built. That house was built on the lot where they now have the post office. So I have tons of correspondence between Casper City Town Council wanting to put sidewalk, and they want to move her house so they could build the post office. She was not going to have it, and she gave it to him. They ended up doing that, and she said, "I don't want that old house anyway." She preferred her wagon anyways. So that was that. The wool growers. This is an interesting thing. In the Nebraska papers, I found mentioning in 1894 that they organized the Wool Growers Association and Luther was president. But if you look at the history of Wyoming, it's almost like it went defunct. They don't even have it that early. So I don't know what happened. But see, he doesn't get the credit. He doesn't get the credit for building the Stone Ranch. And I'm hoping to change that. I'm going to try to change that. And then he doesn't get the Wyoming wool growers either. So poor Luther. They're growing their range. This is a rough outline, but they're pretty big now. And they've got a lot of deeded land in this. She's earning her sheep queen. And the cattle growers, the cattlemen don't like that. There's no fences though. There's some fences starting to come in, but they're expanding. So they went from Kirby Creek down to Casper, over to Lander, up and over. They've got reservation land. When they opened that up for white settlers to buy in the reservations, they had lots of stuff. Morrison Meadows and Morrison Canyon, the family had a big ranch up there they called Hidden Springs Ranch. In the 95, the first two daughters are married. This is my line. This is my grandmother Letty. And they called her Letty. She married Nick Schreiner, who was a big stockman from Nebraska. He made his fortune in putting up feedlots along the rail lines. And as these families grew into, none of the girls married any local boys. They all married stockmen, out and about, sheepmen. And yeah, it's interesting. The other daughter married an attorney and they stayed in Casper, but they didn't marry local. Deadline 97. This is when things start getting pretty tough. The two-legged predators. Cattlemen put a deadline between in my grandma's range. Said no sheep past this line. She said, "That's my land, and I'm going," and she did. She was at the hot springs with. There was 5 horses shot. 4 of them were hers, and it was a friend with them. That horse was shot. They were hobbled. They found him shot. They were, she offered a $500 reward, which is worth $20,000 today. I don't know if they ever found him. But she was hot. She was angry. She had to borrow a buggy to go home, get more horses, come home. It was a mess. And then they blew up 2 of her wagons and clubbed 400 sheep. And so that was tough. The next year, Luther dies. And he was 69, led a big life, obviously. He had been sick with just a common cold. He went out, it was December, he died on his birthday, or near his birthday. And he went out to check his bucks. And he came back and he never recovered and he died of pneumonia at Allen's house. So that's his headstone. And that's what it says, pioneer of Wyoming, built first reservoir. So Lincoln is 14 when his dad dies, and he really is already in the business. All the kids are in the business. They're already running sheep camps of their own. They're moving their own wagons. He really steps up, and he's now supplying all these. So I have, I'm not kidding, a suitcase full of his daily diaries from about this time period all the way to the 1960s. He had a little daily diary in his pocket, and every sheep camp he was writing millions of miles every year. So Lincoln steps up and is partner, good partner for his mom. So is Lavisa. She's the other daughter, the youngest, third daughter. And Lavisa is everybody, they go by their middle names. Lavisa is another long-term name that goes in my line. That's both of them. Shearing by hand back in the good old days. And they worked really hard. They did go to private college, I just wanted to include this because Lucy was very staunch in making sure the kids were educated. And so they were to Nebraska Normal College. Which Normal College, isn't that a weird name? I actually Googled that. What's Normal College? And they said, well, anything that they actually teach is normal. And I'm thinking that's not what I mean. They actually called it Normal College. 1900. So, a couple of years after her husband dies, they actually go on a 2-month trip through Europe. So they're doing pretty good now. And they take a ship. They weren't that impressed. They liked Wyoming so much better. They actually were quoted saying that they've got some old buildings, but they don't have Wyoming. Oh, and then Lucy marries Curtis Moore, and everybody remembers her as Mrs. Moore. Sad. Obviously, you can see how I stand. Curtis Moore was a sheep herder. He had a family back east. I don't know if he was divorced, I have no idea, but he had some kids. And she didn't want to marry a sheep herder. This was a business agreement. He was a good bookkeeper and he was very frugal. She liked that. She also liked the fact that he didn't cuss and he didn't drink. He wasn't like a lot of the sheep herders that come into camp. She wouldn't allow alcohol or cussing in camp. But when they were paid, they would go to town, rip it up, and come back hungover, and she just thought that was awful. He minded his P's and Q's, but she thought that was okay. And he didn't have any sheep, so she gave him 2 bands. And now he's a stock grower. So they got married. My family never called him anything. Well, I might call him some things, but never other than Mr. Moore. He was never known, and he starts getting in and on the money and starts siphoning it off to the family, and it gets ugly. But she seems happy. She looks happy. She's probably about 43 there. And things are going good. This is just, I have probably, I'm not kidding, 150 pages of newspaper articles, snippets of the family, and they're shipping 85,000 pounds of wool. There are 10 cars of, railway cars full of sheep and wool. Business is pretty good. They buy themselves a big house in LA. And she likes California. She likes it in the winter time for obvious reasons. But it's interesting. The worst winters here, she wasn't there. She came back. She wanted to make sure everybody was taken care of. The Woolies came first. She got a brand new car one time, and her son said to Mom, "Don't put any lambs in the back seat." And she's like, the Woolies paid for it. They can write it if they need it. This is a fun one. Delivering 16,000 pounds of groceries the 28 string team to Mrs. L.L. Moore sheep camp at Duranch. It's front page. May 30th, 1904, Lincoln Morrison is shot. It's at night, the dogs start barking, he steps out onto the tongue of the sheep wagon and he is shot. It is amazing he lived. He was gut shot, it went clean through, missed all his organs. His mom's camp was a few miles or down the road. They got him there, and you know how she saved him? She saved him by pouring vinegar in that gunshot. And they were able to keep it clean, and that vinegar kept it from, I guess, infection. And they got him down to Casper, to his sisters, and that's where he convalesced. But he survived. There's several books out there that he died. Lincoln Morrison died. No, he did die. Lucy offers a $3,500 reward for any information on the killers. Yeah, hires Joe LaForce. That's worth $126,000 today. So she's not messing around. They never found him. They never found. There's rumors, and a pretty big name to that new rumor, but I won't say it. But just touch me, drive me with it. Yeah, cookie. And so Joe LaForce never finds him either. But 10 years later, they made an arrest in Red Lodge from a guy sitting at the bar. I don't know if he was bragging about it or what, but he got out. There was no proof that he could have actually been in this spot, but it was kind of interesting that they did make an arrest. They probably wanted their reward, and they didn't. Carolyn Lockhart, you guys know Carolyn Lockhart? Okay, so she wants to spend the summer at sheep camp. But Carolyn Lockhart, she drinks and cusses. So Lucy's like, none of my camp. And she goes, you can spend it with Levisette. Go out with Levisette. Levisette and Carolyn had a hoot of a time. And actually later in Carolyn's life, she talks about, she liked to share about stories at sheep camp. She's a little rough in her book about the description, but I think it made her, look like it was a little bit tougher. But her and Levisette had a great time. So 3 years later, she writes a New York bestseller, and that's The Fighting Shepherdess. It is not a story on my family. It is just inspired by Lucy, but the mother in the story is not a good woman, and my grandmother went ballistic. She just did not like it. So she always threatened she wanted to write a rough book, and she didn't. But Carolyn Lockhart does a big deal, and the book was such a big success that they made a movie. And in 1920, it was released. Anita Stewart was one of the popular movie stars, right? That's just now starting to become movie stars, right? And it's a complete flop. But it's still pretty cool, right? Yeah. So this is fun. So Lucy loved cars, automobiles, trucks, anything that moves with a motor. And so she owns a 2-ton antiquarian on the front page of the Casper newspaper. She's about 60 in this picture, and Levisette is driving, and that's about the end of her life. This is probably one of the last pictures of her. So in 1922, she must have female problems. She's got a tumor on the ovaries. They did surgery on it in 1922 in Shoshone. And they gave her too much anesthesia. It's not doable. So devastating blow for the family. She had a little girl, and the little girl was about 6 years old. And so she went to live with her grandmother. So Lucy started raising the 6-year-old. And there's old Curtis Moore standing there on the bed. Sorry. We're all family, right? So 1928, they go on a 30-day Alaska cruise. Lucy's 71. So she's living, she's getting out. But there is no place like home. Wyoming is her home. And she had lots of places where she really liked. Where Luther liked Casper, and that was more of his range down there, and into the business, took care of business that way. She liked Lucerne and Thermopolis. She loved the hot springs. She had a house in Lucerne. She had a house in Purvey. And they had, the rest of the families had ranches mattered all over the place. But they went on an Alaska cruise. So they took the train from Thermopolis to Seattle. Okay. Shoshone. Shoshone was back in its glory days, which is far from now, right? She's in the Shoshone Hotel lobby, and there is a journalist there from the East Coast writing about the Wild West. And Grandma walks in with her daughter-in-law now, and probably a couple other people, and someone says, "Hey, there's a sheep queen. You should go talk to her." And they're probably going, "You should go talk to her." So Nell was witness to it, and she wrote about it in her journal, and then it was reprinted in Lady of a Legend. So I'm going to read this to you because I think it gives you a little bit of an idea of her personality, and maybe a little glimpse into her. So this is her words, not mine. First of all, this is the young boy. Well, she called him young boy. I don't know how old he was. You know, Mrs. Moore, from what I have read and heard, you early old timers here in the Western Range country had it pretty soft. You came here after the army had combined the Indians on reservations and the buffalo were all gone. All you had to do was turn out your sheep on the free grass and sit back and watch them increase. You had small expenses, no land taxes, no income tax. You paid low wages. You had it pretty easy. What'd you say? So, young man, you think we old timers got something for nothing? No pioneers anywhere ever had things easy. Often there is far harder coinage than silver and gold, as my husband would say. People, she's talking about Luther. People who must have it easy, comfortable, and safe never become pioneers. They wait until all the pioneering is done. Young man, I was born in California Gold Camp. For the first 25 years of my life, I never had a single waking moment free from the fear of Indians. I knew what the Red Savage was from the first-hand experience. You think I had it easy when we brought 3 little girls into this wild country with Indians all around, and I lived 5 years without seeing another woman? You call it taking easy caring for a new baby boy in a tent when the temperatures often went 30 below? 4 little children to feed and clothe with the nearest store 150 miles by team? You think I only had to sit idly by and watch our sheep grow into an easy money? When I herded those boys for a week one spring when my husband was snowblind, and I had to work myself skin and bone in an effort to save as many lambs as I could, the coyotes and wolves, no gun. You think it was fun having my only son shot down by cowboys, caring for him in a sheep wagon 25 miles from a doctor? Something for nothing, huh? All that wool and meat we produced to feed and clothe you city people. You think it wasn't deep worried when prices to producers were so low in the 1890s that we were forced to give away a whole trainload of sheep, which wouldn't even pay the shipping costs to Chicago. Those sheep brought good profits to middlemen and also helped feed and clothe many people. You think it was something for nothing, young man? When just 3 years ago, we again had to give away our wool and sheep because of the fallacy of some politicians that you can have prosperity by trading away domestic products in order to help the same kind of producers in a foreign land. And she slipped into third person often when she was trying to make a point. That's a lot in her, that was a trait she had. You think it was easy when Mrs. Moore did without many comforts and saved her hard-earned money and bought up land and water in order to survive when people began to move in onto her range? Young man, don't ever again tell pioneers they got something for nothing. All over the West, there are many men and women who lived on the frontier. Do not ever forget what they cost them. But honestly, I would not trade 1 minute of my life for the kind of life your women folk live back east. And I have seen what it's like. That's easy. Yeah, I'm almost there. Yeah, I think, oh, so in the diary, Nell writes, oh, she said, I quivered when that boy said that to mom, because she's gonna turn around. She said she turned around on her heel and just let him have it. So I believe it. So Lucy died in September of 1932. She's buried next to Luther in the Highland Cemetery in Casper. Her mentions of her passing went across the country. There are so many different obits and stories. As she was honored as the strong character she was. 7 years later, she was honored in the American Business Professional Women's League, that's still happening today. And she was acknowledged and praised for her time and courage and her personality. And Bob Edgar, thank goodness for Bob Edgar. You maybe some of you knew him. He started collecting, he's collected my family's cabin out of Copper Mountain and saved it, sitting there now. Lady of a Legend was published. Half of it is the manuscript from Nell, which is the daughter-in-law. And those people, Nell and Lincoln, she married Lincoln. They did daily diaries. And one last thing, yeah. So the daily diaries, and we have them. And have you ever heard of, so one diary that both of them would write every day, kind of what they did, and they would get into argument. And it was written in the diary, well, he would have just done this. And he would respond in the diary, well, if you would have done that, I could have done this, that kind of thing. Cracking me up. It's just so funny that they had that kind of, they wrote a lot, they wrote things out a lot. So anyways, yeah, I think that, keeping our family histories together is important, and thank you for listening to my family legacy story. Lucy Morrison. Yeah. And if you have any questions or.
You had a lot of sheep on top of them.
She did.
My great uncle ran up there. Together, not together, but he had part of, I remember,
Yep, she did.
and, but I think they both originally started out on the stagnant. Until they gave it to the Indians.
Yep, they did. She had them up there, and Morrison Meadow and Morrison Canyon is up just below Stagner. So I'd love to go up there. I'm trying to figure out how we get up there. So
I've been up there, but I was fortunate.
yeah, yeah, that's the thing. And some of her cabins are still around. I've got several families that have come to me. And just said, that they've got her cabin up on their range and that, take me out there. She loved Copper Mountain. That was their summer camp in Copper Mountain.
You know where it was?
I don't know where it was exactly, but they're gonna show me. They've got, and they also, she had a boxcar up there, a railroad boxcar, and wrote somewhat, do you know where it was? On Kirby, yeah, and then it was Lucy's kitchen. I don't think she liked to cook. She always had to cook. So she could cook, but she hired to cook. Didn't like it.
I think that cabin on the mountain.
Oh, yeah, I think so too. Jones, Bridger Creek, Kirby Creek. And yeah, they were all in there. And she didn't mind moving over. I mean, this is a time when there was no fences. And when that time started changing, she was open to that. But her era, she was a bridge into such a different time. I mean, for automobiles and, she rode side saddle, by the way. That was side, she wore a dress and side saddle all her life. And so, just that would make you tough. Just that alone. And she could ride really fast. And that's the other thing, we don't have any pictures of her when she's young. We only have pictures of her when she's older. And that's for obvious reasons. There wasn't a lot of photographers around. But she really was a small, athletic woman. And she could, her son, and I've got lots on Lincoln, interviews and, taped interviews. And he said, his mom ride a horse faster than any guy. And that she was just really, very, she had to be. So, and she was tough, and and there's some families that have that because she was pretty opinionated, and if you rubbed up against her wrong, I think that was it. She was so careful with protecting her family. I mean, let's face it, she had 4 children. She had one that died, yes. She had 4 children in this range up here, and they all survived. That's pretty good with everything that's happening. She's lucky. I mean, Lincoln could have been killed easily. Luckily, he wasn't. So we still have, so the family stayed in this area until the 1970s. They were up here out of Batizzi. Actually, my aunt's still alive. She's 87, and she, that was the Pitchfork connection. So they were here, and then they left, and now we're back down with my dad. So, yeah, it's pretty neat, and the houses are still around, so.
Or anything in any of those diaries about dipping their couple,
Dipping days. Yeah, they didn't like them, not anything in particular, I don't know what, just that they had dip. That
I
was it.
think they built those together. One family.
Oh,
They blew one sheet. Third way, so the other one makes a little through that. But I'm not worried with seeing.
yeah, oh gosh.
It's all piercing.
Yeah, well, in Lincoln's daily diaries, yeah, that they were dipping and how long it took them. And and how nasty it was.
All over that mountain.
Okay. Well, I'm supposed to be going out there pretty soon, so maybe I'll see. It's all new territory for me, but. But it's, yeah, there's that, but all those, areas where their range and. The country. Lots of, she loved to run, though she liked to do, she actually took stagecoach, which she said was the biggest mistake of her life. On Bird's Eye Pass coming over. Before the Wind River, and it rolled over and broke her leg. She said she'll never ride that stinking stage again. Modern stuff, what? But they did do the train back and forth with Casper, just to show you. But, yeah. Yeah, these books are just our books of mentioning of the family. There's more, I just grabbed a few. And I said, I wish I had more pictures, but I don't have too many. But thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.